think it was Andy Edwards. You know Andy? It's like he was on Beato. There's like a English commentator on music.
Andy Edwards. Never heard of him.
Hello and welcome to this video. I've been doing a lot of decorating recently, a lot of painting, and then a lot of having to bag stuff up and bloody take it down the tip, you know, all sort of a, you know, quite boring work. But I enjoy it because I get to put a record on. And in those situations, you know, I'm not sat there listening to it because I'm reviewing it or trying to work on some video or even listening to something I don't like to get some inspiration on why I hate it so much. Which for last week was me listening to Argus by Wishbone Ash and realising I absolutely hated that album. And so by the end of the week I was listening to it just to fill myself up with the sort of anger needed sometimes to get me through one of those videos. But that's not what's going to be happening today, because in those times when I am painting the wall or bagging up rubbish, you know, and I've put an album on in the background, I'm not there listening. I don't want to be skipping tracks. I don't want to be like, oh, I only like side one on this. You know, I want an album that I can put on and listen all the way through. So here we have 10 albums that I could listen to all the way through, always and forever. It's been like that since I first heard them, right? I love them. I always will love them. Now, I originally was going to say that this was the 10 albums with not a bad track on them, but actually I don't think that's the case. I think some of these albums have got bad tracks on them, but I don't care because I love the bad tracks. I know they're bad, or I know they're a bit weak or whatever, and we can get into this on this video, but no, I just love these albums. I'm going to explain to you why I love them so much, and it really does show that in the end, I go back to the music that formed me between the ages of around about 11, 12 and 15, 16, I would say. Certain albums I heard then that I absolutely love, and they're here in this list. So rather than ranking them, I've grouped them into sort of genre and sort of history. And so I will begin the video then. That was a little introduction, only 2 minutes there, but just so you know what we're doing, this is the 10 albums I can always listen to, always. And the second always is because that means I always have been able to listen to them. They've always been staples. There's certain albums I buy and I love them and I keep listening to them for maybe a couple of years, and then suddenly they lose that thing and they're not on the list anymore. You know the sort of things, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, things like that, you know. That's not on here, you know, and those albums are great. Also, there's albums that are amazing, but I don't love them personally that much. And also, there's albums that do have absolutely brilliant tracks all the way through, but for some reason they fall a little bit flat for me. So at number 10, remember this is no ranking order, this is one of the first albums I ever bought by one of the first bands that I ever liked. You know, we're going back to around about 1980. You got the new wave of British heavy metal coming out. I sort of get swept up in that, but there's some standard bands that every guy that liked rock music at the time you were going to like. And of course, above all other bands, it was AC/DC. And I can remember around about 1980, a friend of mine at school who was only 12, his big brother took them to see AC/DC with Bon Scott on that tour, and he came back to school and he was telling us all about it, and he couldn't believe it because Angus had gone round the room, you know, and he'd been able to pat Angus on the back, and I can remember saying to him, what was it like? And he said, well, it was spotty and sweaty, and I didn't mean it like that, you know, I meant what was it like to you, but that was the description he gave me. And so a couple of years later, after Back in Black, the BBC did show a live concert by AC/DC. That was incredible. And I can remember I'd taped it on VHS and then went to school the next day because it was on late, and I couldn't wait to get home and put it on, and it just delivered. Live AC/DC, that's one band that in a way are even a little bit beyond what they are in the studio. Now, when I first came up with this, I thought it's got to be Highway to Hell. Now, Highway to Hell has probably been my number one go-to album to listen to more than any other. You know, when I really am stuck with something, I've got a car journey or something like that, I'm going to jump in the car, what am I going to grab? Highway to Hell every single time. And I have to be honest, that album's amazing and I love it, but I have maybe listened to it a bit much. And so another AC/DC album is emerging for me as being the sort of zenith pinnacle of AC/DC-ness. And surprise, surprise, it's this one, If You Want Blood. Right. Now, if you watch this channel and look underneath it all, you'll see I'm not so keen on live albums. I don't like the fact that they're not recorded quite as well. Sometimes they're a bit echoey. You know, it's not the performance. I love mistakes. I like all that edge. I don't mind a few bum notes. It's not that. It's usually just the way they're recorded, especially with the drums. The drums don't have that punch on a live gig. This album, it sounds absolutely stunning, and there is a bite to this sound here that you don't really get on the albums. Of course, everyone divides AC/DC up into the Bon Scott years and then the Brian Johnson years. I'm only really a fan of the Bon Scott years, but that breaks down into sort of chapters as well. You've got the early Australian period where they bring out high voltage TNT, and then they bring out high voltage, and that's all a mix and match, you know. And that's a weird period, and you don't feel that there's really a masterpiece there, although there's incredible stuff there. Then they bring out Dirt Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, and I don't think that's a masterpiece. It's a good album. The first masterpiece is Let There Be Rock, then you've got Power Age, then you've got this album, and then they do Highway to Hell, different producer. They ditch their uncles who were producing them up until that point and get Mutt Lange in, who polishes them up, adds lots of backing vocals and stuff, and I think it just creates the perfect AC/DC on Highway to Hell. Of course, Bon Scott dies. That energy that they've created carries on into Back in Black, and Back in Black becomes an album that could be here as well. I can stick that on at any time, although I've overplayed that one. Now, this one, I'm finding as time goes on, that this selection, because when I was a kid, I was always a little disappointed because all the live bands I loved, they put out a double album. So I could put up with it being live because you got a double album with loads of stuff on. It was like a way of getting a greatest hits. I would often go for a double album, believe it or not, for a band if it was a double live album, because I'd be able to check out all their material in one go. Of course, this is a single album, which put me off it a little bit. I always wanted it to be a double album, but actually when you hear it, sit down and put it on, this is the perfect, programming of any album ever, really. It's perfection. Riff Raff, Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be, Bad Boy Boogie. You get the Jack. Now, some people don't like the Jack. They think it's a bit strange. It's their slow blues about venereal disease. But for me, Angus is one of the great blues guitarists of all time, and I love the fire and grit and bite he plays the blues on that track, and then it finishes with the brilliant Problem Child. Then you turn it up over, we got a Whole Lot of Rosie. Now that version is the definitive version, not the Let There Be Rock version. Rock and Roll Damnation, amazing, High Voltage, and then you get the epic Let There Be Rock, and you have to hear it live. And then it finishes off with Rocker. Recorded in 1978. This is a summation of everything they did up until Highway to Hell, when everything changes. And they are, at this point, still a dirty, gigging band, not some massive stadium band. There was a very strange noise that just happened in the corner of the room. I don't know if you heard it, but it made me jump a little bit. I love it. Great cover. So that's my number 10 album. So we're into this sort of early rock music period of my life, I'm buying all sorts of albums. Judas Priest, Uli, John Roth, Scorpions, what else was into at that time? Diamond Head, Iron Maiden, it's all that type of thing, Motorhead. And Ace of Spades, the album, really came close to being on this list. I can sit down and listen to that every day, although it is slightly samey, because Motorhead can be slightly samey. Now, the one I'm going to put up here is not my favourite album by the band, right? But it is the one that I go to over and over again, and it's the one that I can listen to beginning and to the end and delights me of every second of it. And it is, of course, Black Sabbath, Paranoid. Now, many people would think that this is their greatest album. My favourite album by them is probably Volume 4. over the years, Sabotage has come up, but after Volume 4, they start getting proggy and experimental, and I like it, but it does make the albums a little bit uneven for me. Whereas up until Volume 4, those first 4 albums are just an incredible development of rock music before your eyes. And for Volume 4, it's the high point. They get to their most darkest, desperate, nihilist point at that point. Incredible stuff. But that sort of foreboding that you get on Volume 4, it's a little bit, it pushes you away a little bit. And I like it, you see, I like that. But this is just Sabbath discovering the formula. They've done the first album, they've discovered the formula, and they know exactly what they're doing. They go into the studio in 1970 and invent heavy metal and prog metal. They invent everything here on this album. And it's just a delight to listen to. You know, that awful cover with some bloke with a crash helmet on jumping out from behind a tree in his underpants and a tracksuit. It's so printed on your mind that you don't even mind it. You don't mind it at all. I can remember I bought this in 1980. It was on special offer. They'd stuck a sticker. We're going back 46 years now. They stuck a sticker there. And when I ripped that off, I had a white rip on my Black Sabbath Paranoid album, which upset me, greatly. Now I would just leave that. But when you're 12 years old, it's terrible. And so you see that I have painted in with black paint, and I've tried to paint the ath of Sabbath back in, and over the years that pink has worn away. This shows the conviction and importance of this album was to me. And of course it would have, I know it's going to have this inside the biro artwork that is always on these albums at the time, because I was literally putting these albums on over and over again, sitting there with a pen doodling. Sometimes on the inner sleeve, sometimes on bits of paper. I was big into art when I was a kid, you see. So this album is just, I don't think there's another Black Sabbath album quite like it. War Pigs, Transcendental, Paranoid, the ultimate sort of knuckle-headed, rock song. Obviously, a quick pastiche of Communication Breakdown by Led Zeppelin. And if you listen to Led Zeppelin and Cream in depth, you will see that everything on those albums is here being reinterpreted by Sabbath. But the sort of Ozzy's voice, the Geezer Butler vision and lyrics, all of that together, and then Tony Iommi's sort of, fumble-fingered, decapitated finger approach, which has dropped the guitar down and made it sludgy out of necessity in a way. Everything's channeled through that. It's absolutely wonderful. I think that the reason I love this album so much is because there's so many moments where the band just let fly, and it's just guitar, bass and drums, and Iommi's soloing and Geezer Butler's. It sounds like a Cream jam, but it's got such a vibe. Bill Ward is off the scale on this, but yeah, Planet Caravan, where they go, well, shall we invent another genre? Shall we invent another genre? I think we have invented heavy metal and prog metal and influenced progressive rock. But in the future, they're going to have a thing called trip-hop in the 90s. I think we should invent that. All right, then, let's go and do that thing right now. And so they do Planet Caravan, which they always have a slow, strange song on there. That's so beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And then we get the incredible Iron Man. Side 2, Electric Funeral, Hand of Doom. And this is where Sabbath go off the charts, going all over the place, ranging here, ranging there, all strange arrangements, tempo changes, all sorts of stuff. Then we get the incredible Rat Salad, which is 100 times better than Moby Dick. And old Bill Ward actually does a great drum solo. He's flying on that, absolutely flying. And then we end up with Fairies Wear Boots, which you have to have a chunga on, don't you? You need a chunga on a rock album. And of course, this is famously the riposte to a bunch of, I suppose, what were they, hippies or mods that had slung some abuse at Geezer. And so before running off, he'd shouted back, Fairies Wear Boots. I love it. I love this album. Knuckle-headed rock, but at an absolutely sophisticated level. Absolutely amazing. I can always put that on. This one is another album that I listen to 2 or 3 times a year. It goes on the car. Once it's in, it doesn't leave for about a week. And I can't believe that even though I've heard all these tunes so many times, and many of you are going, oh, I've heard that album too many. Not for me. With this album, it still holds my interest, absolutely. Some people say side 2's a little weaker than side 1. Well, side 1 is like, oh, you don't even know what it is, do you? I'm talking about it, you know, building up the tension, then I'm off talking about it. You don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Led Zepp 4, the untitled album, 4 Symbols. Here's my original copy, all knackered with the thing in there like that. There we go. Love this album. Side 1 is perhaps one of the greatest sides in rock music. Opens up with Black Dog. That's Led Zeppelin. What do you want to know about Led Zeppelin? Why they're great? Listen to Black Dog. It's all there. Then we get Rock and Roll, which is a rock and roll pastiche. Now, that's probably my least favourite track on here, right? But I don't like rock and roll pastiches. I don't like them. I don't like them when... I know why these bands do it. There they are. They got a deal. They got all the long hair. They're doing all the heavy rock or proggy heavy rock stuff they're doing. Early 70s. They're all loving it. But all these guys grew up listening to rock and roll, and they all really want to play rock and roll. You know, this is like jazz musicians who really want to play some Rush or something like that. You know, we're all like this. We all want to go back and play the things we loved when we were a kid. So Zeppelin do this all the time. They're always going back there. I actually think rock and roll, Bonham's drumming is off the charts. That little drum break at the end is incredible. And the sound of the guitars, it's got a charm that carries through. I sometimes have difficulty with tracks on albums which are silly. And I shouldn't. Because it shows that the band's not taking themselves completely seriously. And when you're not taking yourself seriously, you have the best chance of coming up with the sublime, which of course they do with the Battle of Evermore. Absolutely beautiful with Sandy Denny's beautiful voice. Robert and Sandy Denny's voices entwining, all that sort of John Paul Jones genius coming forth with all the mandolin playing. And although I think this was created by Jimmy Page, wasn't it? On John Paul Jones's mandolin, but they're all there doing all that. It's absolutely beautiful. And out of those minimal instrumentation, Zepp can often do this. This is the genius of Jimmy Page. Out of that minimal instrumentation, they're able to weave something that's quite magical, and it goes off on a tangent. That middle section I absolutely love. And then we get Stairway to Heaven. Now, I know you're all shouting, oh, I don't want to ever hear that again. When I put Led Zepp 4 on, when it gets to Stairway to Heaven, I always think, oh, I don't want to listen to this one again. Right? Then it starts up, and it's so delicate and pretty that I'll stay for a little bit of a listen. You can't, it's beautiful with the little recorders coming in and all that. And then they hook me in every single time. And every single time I go on that journey and it gets to Jimmy Page's guitar solo. Now, I have elsewhere that says that Jimmy Page is overrated. Now, on those videos, of course, I'm just goading people and annoying them, just trying to get on people's nerves to, stir the algorithm on YouTube so that we've got a channel here. All those of you who watch videos like this, proper videos, you have to appreciate that's the meat and potatoes. That's the day job, is doing that. In reality, I think that Led Zeppelin were not a great live band. They had their moments, most live bands do, but they weren't a great live band. And I don't think Jimmy Page is that great a guitarist when you put him up against a Jeff Beck or a Jimi Hendrix or even an Eric Clapton. But what he is a genius in the studio. Zeppelin are an incredible studio band, right? And they're exploring the studio in the way that the Beatles were, towards the end of their period. They almost like pick up where the Beatles left off and they amp it all up, And in the studio, through the use of different guitar tones, Jimmy Page is able to weave incredible architectural solos that work within the tune, right? I think that has made everyone think he's a guitar wizard. Recently, they've released some footage of Led Zeppelin live at the Bath Festival. I sat and watched it all last night. And I have to be honest, I really thought... Robert's incredible at this point, before his voice changed. Absolutely incredible. John Paul Jones is rock solid, but John Bonham and Jimmy Page, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's just, it's just not. It's just a little bit ropey all the time. There's a lot of improvisation going on there. I don't know. I feel as time's gone on, what I appreciate about Zeppelin is what they could do in the studio, which is borne out that they never produced a Made in Japan or a Strangers in the Night, did they? Now, a lot of people think that when you flip it over, side 2 isn't as strong, and they're just wrong, right? They're wrong. Misty Mountain Hop, 4 Sticks, they go weird, right? You've had your proper Led Zeppelin feel, you've had your Sublime Zeppelin on side 1, you flip it over, you're into side 2, Misty Mountain Hop's just weird, 4 Sticks is even weirder. Then they come in and do the full-on, you know, let's go to California, be all like hippie five, pretend you're Joni Mitchell. They do that on a track literally called Going to California, and then they come back to the blues. And they come back to When the Levee Breaks, of course, a blues staple going right back to the beginnings of blues, you know. Memphis Minnie, was it? And they there, I think, defined what it is to be a white British blues band. And they take the form and turn it into something else, forming like a bridge between that and trip-hop, hip-hop, rap, you know, a whole host of music that's going to come in the future. It's both archaic and futuristic, and I think it could well be Zeppelin's strongest moment. Led Zeppelin before, always put it on the car, it just goes round and round. I love it. Right, so there's the rock for you. They're my 3 most listenable or listened to rock albums. We now move to the prog, and I'm afraid I've only got 2 prog albums. My interest in progressive rock was quite short. It was like a bridge between heavy rock and jazz rock fusion. Later on, when I joined I.O.U, I then went back to the prog and explored it in great depth, both personally and in the bands I.O.U and Frost and all that lot. So I became associated with the genre. I know people who watch this channel, especially people like Scott Lady, who feels that I'm a prog channel, and I am sort of at the heart a prog channel. And I know the audience here are proggers, but I'm not so much a progger, right? So I've only got 2 albums here. One of them I would say is pretty close to perfection, but the one I'm going to offer is not. It's not this band's best album, but it's the one I always go to. And I think this is going to strike a chord. When I was decorating the other day and I came up for the idea for this video, I sat there and thought, oh, I fancy some prog. And this album was the one that came into my head. I put it on and I loved every single minute of it. It is Fragile by Yes. Now, this will be an example of an uneven album, which I love. Now, why is it uneven? Well, it's interesting because on the one hand, they have had their nursery rhyme moments. Remember Genesis? Genesis is sort of okay, and then they get Steve Hackett, they get Phil Collins, and suddenly they do Nursery Crime. And I mentioned Nursery Crime in this because this nearly was on the list. Nursery Crime was also in here. But actually, Nursery Crime does have a few moments that are a little bit, not totally flat, but a couple of Harlequin. It's gone from amazing to sort of good to sort of quite good. They're nothing terrible. I love the album. Some of my favourite albums, I've just been going through looking at all my albums of which ones I'm going to pick. Some of my favourite albums have absolutely awful moments on, but the great moment is so great that it just makes the album one of my favourite albums. Miles Davis, Frank Zappa, they have never created one of these albums for me. Their experimentation and the pushing the envelope and the fact that there's a lot of double albums there can make the albums a little bit hard going. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Fragile's not like that. I put it on the other day, it just whizzed by. Absolutely incredible. Roundabout. The definitive yes. Now the thing is, as I was going to say, they're having their nearly went off on a tangent. On top of a tangent, I nearly went off on a tangent. They're also having their Genesis moment because now Rick Wakeman's joined and the lineup's here. I nearly pulled the Yes album out. That's another album that does it for me. The Yes album does it for me. But there is a sort of compression in the production and arrangement on the Yes album. It's slightly drawn in. Rick Wakeman's not there. So I don't get the full Yes experience. I love the album, amazing. Here, with Rick Wakeman coming in, it all goes up a gear. I've been thinking recently about Rick Wakeman and Keith Emerson. I love them both. And Keith Emerson's probably a more talented composer stroke keyboardist, perhaps, if you want to compare these two. But for me, my favourite out of the two is Rick Wakeman. The decisions he makes, the things he comes up with, and his genius at arrangement, right? It's Rick's arrangement on here. And of course, because that arrangement comes in, they want to mess around with it, and they do. And when they do it well, it's sublime. But of course, they also make the decision, which is really odd, because they've just got the ultimate lineup. You've now got the Yes lineup. It's only going to make 2 albums, because then Bruford's going to be gone. Alan White's going to come in. He's great. But it's never going to really be that again, right? Close to the Edge is the sublime album. It's greater than this album, without a doubt. But this is the one I want to listen to. There's more going on here. There's more excitement. They are in love with each other. But at the same time, they want to explore their own solo excursions, don't they? Now, actually, I think the solo excursions, because some people criticise them, I think are really, really good. So we open up with Roundabout, definitive Yes, you know, still a hit with the kids now. Then you get perhaps the lowest point on the album, Cans and Brahms, arranged by Rick Wakeman with extracts from Brahms' 4th Symphony in E minor, 3rd movement. Blim, 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 bloom, bloom, blim, 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 bloom, bloom, bloom. Blim, di, blim, di, blim, di, blim, blim, di, blim, di, blim, di, blim. But stop it, Andy. I love it. I know it's bad, right? I know it's bad, but it's astonishing. He's got electric pianos, you know, organs, all these things, and normal pianos. It says here, Cans and Brahms is an adaptation by Rick Wakeman on which he plays electric piano taking the part of the strings, grand piano taking the part of the woodwind, organ taking the part of the brass, electric harpsichord taking reeds, and synthesizer taking contrabassoon. Right, that is arrangement. So that's real serious arrangement, right? That's why they're boasting about it. I like it. I like it. They never did anything like that again, did they? I like it. Then we get John Anderson come in, and we get We Have Heaven, which is like, if we were to bottle the essence of Yes, it would be that track. And then you get South Side of the Sky, which for me is in the sort of handful of tracks, you know, And You and I, Close to the Edge, Awaken, Starship Trooper, South Side of the Sky, Roundabout. Those are all they're the tracks, and South Side of the Sky never seem to quite get contained within that group, and it's just equal to it. It's incredible groove on that. Let's flip it over. Bill Bruford comes in with a couple of minutes of incredible linear drumming, foreseeing so much that's going to happen in fusion and funk. You know, he's ahead of the curve. Then you get the sort of poppy Yes tune, the wondrous stories of this album, which is Long Distance Runaround, which delivers you an epic Yes track in about 3 minutes. We then go into Chris Squire's solo piece, The Fish, which I think is the strongest of the solo pieces. It stands up as a classic Yes tune, even though it's one of the solo ones. Then we get Steve Howe come in and do Mood for a Day. What a guitar player. Who else could play like that at this point, you know, in rock history? Incredible. And then we get Heart of the Sunrise. Now, let's be honest. Yes's finest moment, Heart of the Sunrise. What a bloody amazing album. I love this album. A little bit uneven. They're not all perfect, not like Close to the Edge, but I think full of more interest. More negotiation, which is what might make it a more interesting listen. But some albums are just perfect, aren't they? And this is the second progressive rock album I've got on my list. It is by Rush, Moving Pictures. They don't put a foot wrong on here, and they take risks. They take their sort of progressive 70s period, they pass it through what they've been exploring on Permanent Waves, but for some reason, where Permanent Waves is bright, this is dark. It's dark and smooth and tactile. I always felt, you know, astonishment when I was a kid. I used to put my dad's stereo and sit in the living room looking at the speakers and hearing that. Man, everything sounds perfect. The way people talk about Steely Dan, I feel about Rush on this album. It's way more perfect than Asia. It's like the most perfect album that's ever been made in every respect, you know. And the musical moments are just incredible, right? Neil Peart's drumming on Tom Sawyer. That's the ultimate Neil Peart. I know I've said he's underrated. I know he came out as my greatest underrated. You know why? Because he's such a visionary musician. He's so incredible at what he does that it fools non-musicians into thinking, or drummers who don't know that much about drumming, into thinking that this guy must be the best. They hear it and they're so moved by it, and the drums have such an emotional response that they go, oh my God, this has got to be the best drummer. And if you're measuring the drums on how attached people are to the drums, like the same way people attached to Stuart Copeland's drumming in The Police, a drummer that was influencing Neil Peart, I think, not quite on this album, but maybe the album after. Maybe this album, because there's vital sides. Anyway, then yeah, he's one of the greatest drummers that's ever lived, right? But this idea that he's a virtuoso, and then when you say he's not a virtuoso, you get that prog metal element in the comments going, people only ever go because he didn't have any chops. He didn't have any chops. What are you saying? Let's just get this right. Neil Peart's great. You don't have to push. God, sometimes you lot are so like black and white. It's unbelievable. You know, Neil Peart's great. He's a good technical drummer. He can play some amazing stuff. His stuff's hard to play. You know, that's the bottom line. If you want to sit down and, if you're a drummer, do a playthrough of Le Village Strangiato to see how you get on. It's hard to play. He's amazing. Right? He just did Vinnie Colaiuta. It's quite bloody simple. And I feel his high point, right, for me, is his drumming on Tom Sawyer. And then you get the whole band showing off, don't you, on YYZ. Red Barchetta is probably the closest they come to prog here. It's science fiction dystopian stuff. It's like a mini 2112 in a way. Tells a story, beautiful. And then Limelight, which brings in this sort of much more personal vision of the world that Neil Peart has, is showing where Rush are going to go. They're growing up, I think, with that song in a way. But the guitar solo on it's one of the greatest guitar solos ever performed by anybody ever. Flip it over and we get a sort of the modern minimalist epic, which is Camera Eye. So that sort of James Joyce snapshot of two cities, you know, contrasting between the two. Very, very in the moment, picturesque. It's progressive rock done in a completely new way, as far as I'm concerned. Absolute genius. Then we get Witch Hunt against some proper prog, like we would have had in the old days. And then they look to the future with Vital Signs. And I wish they'd stuck to the vision they have on Vital Signs, because for some reason that take on 80s sort of machine-like music, I absolutely love. I think with Yes, it wasn't them that changed. It was them moving away from Terry Brown as a producer. I think they embraced some of the uglier aspects of 80s production, but that doesn't change this album, does it? It doesn't change the fact that this is bloody perfect and I love this album. And as soon as I put it on, it just takes me on a journey from beginning to end. Right, let's get into some of this fusion, shall we? Everyone knows my favourite band's the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I didn't want to put two albums on the list, nearly did, and the other album would have been Birds of Fire, or In a Mountain Flame, or Apocalypse. Right, all Between Nothingness. I love them all. The only one that slips for me is Inner Worlds, but as time goes on, I'm starting to love that album more and more. Now, I have to put here the album that I feel is my favourite album of all time. This goes on all the time, like once a month. Right, I listen to this all the time. It never lets up. The way it's programmed, it's almost like one big track called The Visions of the Emerald Beyond, and it just goes from beginning to end, and it takes you someplace, and it takes you someplace in a way which is not, it's not artsy, right? It's not popularist. It's rock, but it's also jazz. It's also prog. It's everything and nothing, right? They sound like they're spiritually blissed out on this album. You know, when it opens up, you know, Eternity's Breath, and they're all chanting, "Let me fulfill thine will, let me fulfill," you know, and all that's going on. It's like, what the hell is this? It's like the Jehovah's Witnesses has made the greatest progressive rock jazz fusion album in history. That's what it sounds like, you know. And I love it even more. Of course, it's Visions of the Emerald Beyond. Just love this album. I just love it so much. I'm going to open it all the way up. The cover. How incredible is this cover? I mean, it should be like that, but it's like that. You don't know which way round it is. Could be like that, couldn't it? It represents the great dialectic, and it's just amazing. Then you got the band themselves. This band, this is the ultimate band for me. This is the one. There are Michael Walden on drums, right? I pulled out Wired by Jeff Beck. I could put that on now and love every bit on it. It's hanging around. It should be on this list. I thought I can't have two Narada Michael Walden albums. I can't have him. I have to be happy with this one. And this is just, I love this album. And you can see, it says on mine, to Andy, cheers, Ken Scott. The guy that the greatest engineer producer in history as far as I'm concerned. Ken Scott. The greatest in history. And that's the thing about this album compared to, say, Apocalypse, produced by George Martin. Right, I'll tell you something about George Martin. Amazing producer, but I think he cocked up Apocalypse. I know it was his favourite album, but I don't think, I don't know, maybe it was just too much to have the band and the orchestra playing at the same time. But the sound is not the sound of this album. This album sounds more orchestral than Apocalypse does in a way. The band sounds more orchestral. It's so huge. I just love this album. There's nothing like it. This is the greatest album ever made. I don't care what anybody says. It's the greatest album. Get your bloody revolvers, right? And your, Pet Sounds. There's no Pet Sounds could even wipe the bottom of Visions of the Emerald Beyond. It can't even wipe the bottom. I'd love to have seen Brian Wilson thinking he'd done something with Pet Sounds and then been sat in the sessions for that and what he must have thought. Bloody hell, not that happened, of course. This is a surprise to me because this, again, is not my favourite album by this band. But I think as time's going on, it is. I'm starting to really appreciate the sublime beauty of this album and the perfection on every single second of it. It is. Heavy Weather by Weather Report. I love so many Weather Report albums. They're all amazing. Sometimes they have on the earlier albums, there's sort of slightly indulgent, you could say, moments. On the later albums, there's too much sort of Jacko, Joe Zawinul sort of competition there. I think after this album, this classic lineup that created 830, I don't think they're that good. I think they're better when Omar Hakim and Victor Bailey come in. But here, that lineup of Jacko Pastoris with Alex Acuna, and I think Jacko, of course, he's on Black Market, which I would say is my favourite. I would say it's my favourite album by Weather Report. It's heavier, it's closer to the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and they play more. This one has a delicacy about it. It has a deftness of touch. They've got two percussionists, Manolo Badrina and Alex Acuna. Alex Acuna is one of the greatest drummers that's ever lived. He's astonishing. For Fire, he could well be the greatest drummer that Weather Report ever had. Now people go, really, Andy? You like Peter Erskine and Chester Thompson and Eric Gravatt? They're all amazing. But Alex with Jacko, that short-lived duo rhythm section, bloody hell, it's on fire. The production, as Joe Zawinul's exploring the studio here, this is, people go on about Pet Sounds. Listen to what Joe Zawinul's doing in the studio. This is a jazz rock fusion band, but this is about the studio and what you can do in the studio with the ability to overdub, to record improvisations, have extended periods, and have access to a lot of synthesizers, which at this point is still really expensive modern technology. He's playing an Oberheim Polyphonic, an ARP 2600. He's got acoustic piano on here, melodica. He's got electric piano on here. That really is about this. And what you see, there's no Moog, there's no Jan Hammer sound. He's creating his own. Joe Zawinul is one of the great synthesizer players. But I just find the quality of the production and the deftness of the sound, like Moving Pictures, this is one of the most perfect sounding albums you'll ever hear. And I find as time's going on, I start to love it. Of course, it's overwhelmed by Birdland. Now, Birdland is listen to Zawinul's arrangement. The composition's amazing, but listen to the arrangement on Birdland. But everyone loves it. It was a huge hit single. Listen to it. How many parts has it got? It's like bloody classical music. A remark I made to you, absolutely beautiful. Teen Town, just incredible. You know, Jacko. You know, but everyone loves it. So they think it's a bass. They think it's a bass show-off piece. It's just not at all. It's a disco tune with an incredible melody. A melody that is catchy, but is pulling from Charlie Parker. You know, that's what it is, and it worked. They pull it off. It's great to have these ideas in fusion. Let's fuse this with this. But when you fuse something and it becomes that sort of so much of a touchstone. When I was at college, kids were bloody trying to play Teen Town. You know, 40 years later, Harlequin, beautiful. Then kick it, turn it over. Rumba Mama, you know, that live recording with that incredible metric modulation halfway through. Probably the first metric modulation I ever heard. You know that thing when it suddenly feels like the tempo shifts, that's metric modulation. Palladium, you know, as catchy as Birdland, amazing. The Juggler. Now this is Wayne Shorter. No, that's not, it's not, it's, that's Zawinul again. And that, yes, I've always thought that was the Juggler. Of course it's Zawinul. Anyway. Like Birdland, incredibly organised, incredibly arranged. This is an album about arrangement. And then Havana, which is fire. It's on fire. So that's the second fusion album. The third fusion album I've got is this one. Allan Holdsworth, I.O.U. Right? There could be quite a few Holdsworth albums here. But for me, this one never lets up. Right? They've discovered the formula. Gary Husband's on this album. He's 19, 20 years old. He is channeling Billy Cobham and Tony Williams. And he's given Allan what he needed, what he'd learnt from Tony Williams' lifetime. And he's now channeling it into his compositions. And suddenly, Holdsworth finds a way of presenting his compositions. And it's one of those lineups when they've all come together and it's like a rocket going off. And apparently they recorded this album twice. The first one was even more like a rocket going off. And Gary Husband's recently released a solo album, a collection of all sorts of stuff from his career that's got perhaps some recordings from that initial session. But this is on fire. It really is. A lot of it is Gary Husband. He's young. He has vision. And he's out to kill. He's just all over it. I think who's on bass on here? Paul Carmichael really stays out the way, but provides a fundamental bass role, more of a 70s type bass playing role than you get later along with Jimmy Johnson, who's sort of providing counterpoint. I like that. And we've got Paul Williams on vocals. And I always love Holdsworth when he's got the vocals because it always shifts the album from feeling like an esoteric jazz rock fusion album to sort of like a prog album. There's some incredible riffing on here, but this is amazing. And the centerpiece, of course, is Allan Holdsworth's guitar playing, which for me is perhaps some of the strongest improvised soloing on any instrument ever in the second half of the 20th century. I'm going to put this guy alongside Coltrane. That's what I think. In fact, I think he took music out even further than Coltrane, in a way. Holdsworth, you can never overrate this man. And if you go and listen to it and you don't like it and you just think it's technical and I'm just appreciating it because he's fast and all that type of stuff, I'm afraid it's you don't get it. It just is you. That's the bottom line. Right, I have got a jazz album to finish off with. We're at number 9, and a pop album. The jazz album, so this must be my favourite jazz album. In terms of me listening, this album always delivers everything I want from a jazz album. More than any Miles Davis or Thelonious Monk or even Bill Evans. I absolutely love Bill Evans. And there's a couple of Bill Evans albums. Live at the Village Vanguard album. Sunday at the Village Vanguard. Is that the one? I could put that on and I just love it from beginning to end. But that's just because Bill Evans is a genius. The band's a genius. But we're not talking about Bill Evans, are we? We're talking about John Coltrane. And of course, at number 9, I've got no, I haven't. I got live at Birdland. All right. Again, A Love Supreme's great, but it's one thing. It's this spiritual prayer in sort of like 4 parts, and you have to go into the world of A Love Supreme. I love it. I can also put that album on and go all the way from beginning to end. Absolutely incredible. But this one, right, this is not one of those live albums with a half-an-hour version of impressions on it. You know, it's not that. This is tight. It opens up with Afro Blue. And he's playing a soprano sax on that. And it's that Latin American sound. It's like when he goes to soprano sax, see, there's no soprano sax on A Love Supreme. I have to have a bit of soprano sax from Coltrane. I have to have that on an album. And then you got him doing a jazz standard. I Want to Talk About You. He does it beautiful. Coltrane could play standards in a very beautiful way, but at the end of that, he does a cadenza. This is perhaps the most virtuoso moment in human history, right? Coltrane never did it on another album, I don't think, not like this. It's incredible. It's like you've opened the door to Coltrane's soul, and when you go in it, it's like there's one of them fractal diagrams that just zooms at you. It's like that. Unbelievable. There's nothing on any of the other Coltrane's albums that's like that moment. Unbelievable. It's free jazzed completely, but he's also going through the chord changes. This is incredible. Turn it over and you get The Promise. The Promise is possibly like the sublime Coltrane track. This is what you want to know what John Coltrane's like in a sort of bite-offable, go and check The Promise. Then they do Alabama. Now, whatever's going on A Love Supreme, that vibe you get from A Love Supreme is also on Alabama. Alabama is like a mini Love Supreme, but this is about an atrocity committed by like rape and racists. And the emotion, you could tell Coltrane's reacted to it, and he puts down how he feels about what's happened. Oh, it just gets you, it hits you so hard. Alabama, bloody hell, another incredible high point in Coltrane discography. And of course, I think Coltrane's discography, God, we're probably talking more masterpieces than anybody else in human history. And then after that, you get the sort of almost like just drum and sax duet, which is Your Lady, which is brilliant. Elvin Jones This is just an amazing album. This is an amazing album. If you haven't got a Coltrane album, or you've got A Love Supreme and you want to know the best next album to get this one. Also, it's a live album, although I think there's a couple of studio tracks, but it sounds so clear and beautiful. Right, so we're at number 10. I was going to put Earth, Wind and Fire in. I thought, what album am I going to put in? I just love Earth, Wind and Fire. This is something I don't deal with on the channel. If there's one band I listen to more than any other band, it's Earth, Wind and Fire. I'm always listening to them all the time, right? All the albums, I just love them. And every album's amazing. The live album's one of the greatest live albums ever made, right? And so I was going to put Earth, Wind and Fire, but I thought, which album am I going to put on? And I thought, I'm going to have to put Greatest Hits. And I thought, I can't be putting Greatest Hits on. And the same thing with Stevie Wonder. I absolutely love Stevie Wonder. I listen to him all the time. The album I always listen to more than any other. It's always on in the car. When we go on holiday with the kids in the car, this album stays on for the whole time. We just listen to it on a cycle. And it's Stevie Wonder's Original Musicarium. Again, it's a Greatest Hits album. So, that sort of R&B, pop music, soul, whatever you want to do, I love, right? I don't talk it as much on the channel, but I probably love that style of music more than prog, and I probably listen to it more. The Sgt. Pepper of that is this. Got me working day and night. What are the great? This album, it just doesn't let up. He's just brilliant all the way through. Right, this album is incredible. It's just Thriller's great, Bad's great, even Dangerous I like. But this one, this is what happened to jazz rock fusion. You know, when Michael Jackson, who is like the embodiment of black American popular music at the time in the 70s, he wants to make the greatest black pop album of all, if we want to call it. I hate you know, calling music black, but you lot know what I mean when I say it. And I think that the difference between Thriller and Off the Wall is the blackness, if you can see what I'm saying. It's like Off the Wall, which is a massive, I'm not saying only black people listen to it, but it is a summation of everything that's happened in black music up until that point. The jazz, the blues, the soul, the gospel, the disco, everything, even the semblance of hip hop that's coming in at that time. And he just nails it. It's incredible. It's incredible. Then he crosses over and becomes the biggest artist with the biggest album in the history of mankind, which is Thriller. I cannot tell you how much of a genius album this is. It's a disco album, and I like that because I'm a bit of the old ADHD. I don't like, I mean, it's like, for example, here's an album you wouldn't expect me to love. Nick Drake's first album, Five Leaves Left. I love all the Nick Drake albums. When I put that album on, I absolutely love it. I was listening to it last night, you know. I've lost my copies over the years. I've just bought them again. Couldn't get a copy of Pink Moon, not at a reasonable price, not for me, but I've got the other two. And I may do a video on Nick Drake at some time because I absolutely love him. I love him. It's just so beautiful. And that first album, 69 as well, just there's nothing sounds like it. It's just, and that album could be here. I'm going to put that on the car. But the trouble is with me, you can tell, even at my age, I'm a bit ADHD, a bit hyperactive. I need a lot of stimulus, you see, going on. I need a lot of detail going on. That's what I'm like. That's what I like Allan Holdsworth. I like a lot of stuff going on. Being taken away, drawn into an album like Blue by Joni Mitchell, or Five Leaves Later by Nick Drake, you know, or even Bless the Weather by John Martin, because people don't think I like all this acoustic-y stuff. I think it's American acoustic stuff I don't like. Anyway, I've got to that point where I've done all the 10, and now I'm just getting into chatty mode, you know, and just start to talk about all sorts of things. So I think I have to bid you adieu. 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 I don't like saying adieu. Sounds anti-Semitic if I say that. I bid you adieu. No, it's a adieu. I don't know. I'm not very good at, you know, foreign pronunciations, as you would probably guess. But we've come to the end of it. That was my 10 albums I can always listen to. I just want to get in the car and put them on now. You know, is it my desert island discs? I don't think so. I think if I was on a desert island, I'd have to have other albums that have certain tracks on there that are so great that I couldn't live without them. But I wouldn't be so bothered about the other albums. Maybe I'd learn to love the other bits on the albums I don't like so much. But here, these are albums that just never let up for me. Do you understand the concept? I've just been talking about it for nearly an hour, haven't I? Right, so before I go, I want to draw your attention, because this video is now like coming up to the hour. It's 52 minutes of me going on. I want to draw your attention to the facts that I now have a channel called Andy Edwards Clips, and it's basically the videos I do here that people like, I then take and I edit them down. I mean, I was chatting to some other YouTubers the other day, and I was telling them about my clips channel, and they're going, yeah, but some of these clips, you've cut them down to half an hour. I said, yeah, but it's like an hour and a quarter the original video was. I've cut out 3/4 of an hour. So it's not like when I say clips, the Andy Edwards Clips channel is just me doing a normal length video, which is more acceptable and accessible to normal people. You know, but I know there's a market, I know, probably for people who are lonely and want to feel like they've got a friend in the corner of the room, a chatty friend that likes to talk to themselves. And that's the role I have for many people. So they like me sort of wittering away. Probably puts them to sleep. I'm very aware of this. I'm like the visual sort of musically based version of Horlicks. You know, yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, go and check out Andy Edwards Clips. I haven't put a link in. I'll have to add a link, won't I? That means I've got to go into the default settings in YouTube. I don't like going in there. But I've got to do it. It's like going down in the basement and fiddling with your bloody electric meter trying to change a fuse or something. You know, if you get it wrong, it's all going to come tumbling down. Don't want to be doing that. Anyway, thanks for watching the videos. Please like and subscribe. join all my clubs, because the algorithm's changed and the views aren't what they are. All of us YouTubers are feeling it, and it's okay, it's all right, we're getting on, but everything does seem to have slowed down. It's really strange. We'll have to see. I've had a couple of videos do well, so I can see that's still there, but it is a concern, and that's why I've been chatting to other YouTubers, because we're all worried about it. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.